Okay. Welcome to the podcast. Andy
Thanks.
Stinson, it's great to have you here. Super excited to have a conversation with you. And by way of introduction, you are Reverend Andy Stinson, born in Maine. The 11th generation son to come from Midcoast Maine.
And so they started in Merry Meeting Bay. The homestead was in Aroostook, and we're 5 miles from that. So
Yes.
I mean, we can go. We could get in the car right now, and go down and touch the graves of the first ones that came over.
In what time frame?
1718.
1718.
Yeah. So it's when I come across the bridge, there's a palpable exhale.
Yeah, nice. Okay. I am in my roots.
Exactly right. Yeah.
Roots run deep. You joined the U.S. Army Reserves in 1986, becoming an infantryman and graduating from the U.S. Army Airborne School. You gained an ROTC scholarship in 1989 and graduated from the University of Maine in 1991.
Southern Maine, thank you very much.
Southern Maine,
Huskies.
thank you. Yes. After college, you accepted a commission in the United States Army Reserve as a second lieutenant in the Transportation Corps.
I wanted to fly helicopters, but I couldn't hear, so they gave me a truck, which is a lot less dangerous than a helicopter if you can't hear, because you can't hear in a truck anyway.
I was going to say you can't hear in a truck either.
Exactly.
And you worked as a commercial diver, fisherman on the coast of Maine, eventually running your own boat and buying seafood for export. And during this time, you became a member of the Swedenborgian Church in Portland, Maine. 4 years later, you received a call to the ministry and left fishing to attend Andover Newton Theological School and the Swedenborg School of Religion in Newton, Massachusetts.
Right.
Yeah. Ordained in the Swedenborgian Church in 1999.
It's usually a soft G, Swedenborgian.
Swedenborgian, thank you.
So,
please.
yeah.
Yes. Correct me whenever. I can use lots of correction. Swedenborgian Church in 1999 when you also became a chaplain in the Army Reserve. Currently serving as senior pastor, First Congregational Church of Fall River, Massachusetts. And prior to that, pastor in Warren, Maine. And intermixed in this, I haven't got timestamps right exactly, but you were command chaplain in the United States Army, 804th Medical Brigade in Baghdad.
We were the senior, we were the medical task force for the country of Iraq. So essentially, if you got really, everybody had their own doctors, but if you got really hurt, you came to see us. So we had 3 hospitals, one in the north, one in the center, one in the south, and you provided essentially trauma care for for soldiers throughout Iraq. I was the senior chaplain. I had 7 chaplains that worked for me, basically 2 at each hospital, and then I had one that was a behavioral health guy, so he would kind of do circulation and kind of try to tend mental health.
Were these hospitals bricks and mortar, or were they?
They were at this point, yeah, they were a bricks and mortar. They'd been, so I was there in 2011. We were kind of the last rotation, a full rotation of the war there. So they'd been there for 10 years. So, I say it was a little like coming into the end of a concert. You can tell a lot of stuff has happened, but you don't quite know, like you weren't present for it in that. So, but there's still stuff happening, but it was, there had been a presence there for 10 years. So, yeah, every place we had, I mean, there might've been some tent, kind of accoutrement to it, but it was mostly they had taken over Iraqi buildings. So they were pretty much brick and mortar places, and some of them, interesting in terms of what you found in them. So,
yeah, I'm sure. Yeah. You're a pastoral care coordinator at Penn Bay Healthcare, providing pastoral care and coverage for 109 medical bed clinic care facility, as well as emergency and on-call coverage, and hospice chaplain,
which was the most of my work there. Most of it was end of life care.
Yeah.
In terms of the priorities of need, simply, when you're only one and you've got a pretty big population, and they were no all-in hospice at the time. That was their primary care. So, so that was, and a lot of that was in-home care, which was kind of fun too. So, yeah.
the traveling doctor.
Yeah.
Chaplain.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
Yep. Yeah. And you were senior pastor of the Church of the Holy City in Washington, D.C.
I was.
Yeah.
I sit 5 blocks from the White House.
That's amazing.
Yeah. The one thing I learned out of that was that Harry Truman was right. You want a friend in D.C., bring a dog. It's a tough town. So I was there for a year for a reason.
Shake the dust from your sandals on the way out.
I wasn't what they wanted and they weren't what I wanted. And so we made a mutual decision.
Excellent. I also have in here Operations Center Chaplain. Is this continuation of the Baghdad Surface Deployment and Distribution Command, U.S. Army, provided and coordinated spiritual care for 3,800?
Yeah, so I was mobilized in 2002 with the Surface Deployment and Distribution Command. So they were, and basically what they did is all the ammunition that moves in America and everything that moves overseas by water and that gets loaded on ships, that's their job. So they essentially they brought on a ton of reservists to begin for the mobilization for Iraq. And, because all those, tanks at Fort Hood have to get to get on a ship and go. And so that whole ship part was really there, surface deployment kind of thing. And so they were really unprepared as a lot of parts of it was. And so they found out that a few of these units that they had actually had a chaplain as a part of them, because our unit just had other things to do besides what they were calling us to do. And so they were like, "Oh, good, a chaplain!" And so
insert chaplain.
Yeah, exactly. So I was way out of my depth, and it was a real gift. But I had no business being where I was doing what I was doing. But it was a great adventure in that regard. So I got to see parts of America that. Tooele Army Depot, where we keep all the chemical weapons, and McAllister, Oklahoma, where big bombs are made. And literally there's McAllister, Oklahoma, which is a town, it is the ultimate in mill towns, because the only thing there is an ammunition factory. And if it goes, there's no one will survive it. It is because all the 500-pound bombs, all the big munitions in America are basically made there. And so it's on the prairie, and you just kind of go up to it like Oz, it's just up there on the horizon, and you just keep driving, and it's
never going to get there.
You never get there. And and they were kind of giving us a little walk around as I would go there to basically, our soldiers were kind of stationed around the United States. So I'd go there to kind of, do some visitation and just see how they were doing, see what other issues are coming up and that kind of stuff. As weird as it was, in some ways it was a really odd deployment for them, because they're not, overseas, they're not doing sort of stuff, but they still have a critical function, but they're also, their loved ones are a plane ride away, but they can't go there to go to them. And so there's this way in which they had to hear about how the faucet broke, and there was actually the domestic side of caring for those soldiers was actually kind of challenging in some ways, because they still had to deal with life at home, even though they weren't home and even though they weren't dealing with it, where often soldiers are deployed. It's like, okay, we're apart. Hopefully you can work it out, and we'll work it out, and we'll figure it out when we get back together. But it's very different. So anyway, so we get there and they show us around, and there was a big bang, and one of the guys I was with just jumped, and he says, and the guy giving the tour, he says, "Don't jump. You'll never feel it coming. If something really blows up here, you'll never feel it coming.
No need to jump.
No need to jump. You should not be anxious here at all, because you'll never know. You'll just wake up in the spiritual world. That's it."
Wow.
So yeah.
Interesting. And in 2013, on your birthday, I understand you retired.
I did.
From the U.S. Army Reserve, and 26 years of service.
Yep.
Thank you for that. And you're married to Kristen, 2 sons, 2 grandchildren.
3 now.
3 now.
Yeah. Just 6 months.
Ooh, that's right.
Yeah.
Yes, that is
Timmy.
right. And I have in the notes here that you are cursed with a love of sailing. I know where your boat is.
Exactly.
And other hobbies include reading, finding great podcasts, gaming, shooting, and discerning the Lord's next call.
Yeah.
And I think after reading through that and discussing that, it's safe to say that it's sort of the Johnny Cash song. I've been everywhere, man. And I guess on a final introductory note, I just jotted down that you're a formidable man on a mission. And a little story that's kind of sums this up on a physical nature. So you're a wrestler in high school.
Yeah. Yep.
Good wrestler in high school.
And plug, by the way, the podcast you did with Jim Coffin, just terrific. I've listened to it twice. It's just epic. Like there's so much in that.
Yep.
I really so appreciate that. Like, I've always thought like he's a guy that somebody needs to give a microphone to, and I'm so grateful you did.
Yeah.
So
we'll do it again with him because we only scratched the surface.
Yeah, absolutely.
Barely.
For sure. Right,
So wrestler in high school and coached by Jim Coffin. And so not too long ago, there's a pool table in your parents' house that needs to come out. It's going to be gifted to Chop Point Camp down the road from us. And it's got to come out from the basement, and there's a few stairs, and we've got a ramp set up. And we've done all the engineering that we can do. The rest is up to the horsepower created by humans. So I'm on the top. You're on the back, I think with Benjamin. I think Mike was on the top with me, your brother. And when it was go time, there was this tremendous surge of energy that came from the backside of that pool table. And all of a sudden we were out. And I was expecting this struggle, but not with a formidable man with a mission on the other side. It was amazing. Yeah, it was good.
Yeah. Well, I've got about one speed. So it's just,
go.
It's not the fastest speed. It is not the slowest speed, but it's just go. It's go, Yeah. So,
yeah.
And sometimes it serves me. Sometimes it doesn't. But
yeah. So questions. What made you decide to enter the military? And did you sign up before you graduated?
Yeah. I actually graduated from high school early. So I graduated. I had enough credits to graduate in June or in January rather. And so I wanted to go to school in the fall, but in order to get the initial training done and then get back into the my reserve unit and all that sort of stuff, I managed to finagle it so that I could leave. I left in March of that year to be able to get back by July or so to get all my training done. So then I could kind of step off for college in the fall. So that was kind of that was the plan.
Where'd you go? Where's your training?
For training?
Yeah.
Fort Benning, Georgia.
Okay.
So one of the things is, I don't know, the bio kind of makes me sound cosmopolitan or whatever. No, not cosmopolitan, but that's probably the wrong word. But
let's straighten them out, Andy.
But I had never spent the night outside the state of Maine.
Really?
The first time I spent the night outside of the state of Maine was in Fort Benning, Georgia, which was educational. So it was not exactly a warm reception into the outer realms of the world. So
you're there with how many recruits?
So you end up, the first night you get there, they basically are, they just throw you in this big kind of warehouse with bunk beds and you spent the night there, and it's March and I'm in Georgia. And so I'm already, it's midnight and I'm sweating, and so the whole thing is just entirely then that morning they put you on a bus and you report to your unit, and then there's a lot of people screaming at you for a long time and you do a lot of push-ups. So,
so why what made you decide military though?
Well, I wanted to go to school. My brother's always had kind of you can say I have some bull in me, but he's got couple, and not the and
the worker bull
and the working bull kind. Yeah, exactly. Not the other kind. He is, and so he had kind of plotted a great path for him through Maine Maritime Academy, and so I'm kind of casting around. I don't have that kind of vision and stuff, but I know. I think that this is a way to kind of get there, but and to get into school and all that. But also, I'd started I'd started gaming when I was probably 9 or 10 at a little place down in Bath called the Toy Soldier. And it was filled with mostly, there was largely a wargaming crowd, and it was filled with, either kind of these retired veterans and all this sort of stuff. And it's a little kind of, Red Badge of Courage-ish, where, I just heard the stories of, service and what had happened. And I'm super grateful for that community because, as I said, I didn't spend the night outside the state of Maine until I joined the Army. I had a pretty, I mean, a great education, whatever, but I had a pretty sheltered life in terms of what and that's not bad, but it's certainly a question of what, of options, of what does the world look like, and how is there a bigger world, and outside of the peninsula, the two peninsulas we kind of inhabit here. Right. So, and so I felt like that was kind of the way in which, it sounds a little cliche in terms of kind of join the Army and see the world sort of thing, but there's, meet exotic people and kill them. But it was a real sense of that. And, and my home life was challenging. And so I really felt like I needed, up and out was kind of the right place. Like there was this.
Your father was a Marine.
My dad was, So my grandfather was in the Navy. So my father joined the Marines, and so he was a Marine, and so I joined the Army.
Rounding things out.
Yeah. So,
And how did you pick the Army?
So I think a number of the Army was really the. I had a romantic sense of it at that time. I joined the infantry, I did the ASVAB test, and I had all these kind of, the recruiter was working really hard to sell me on other stuff because I was smart enough to do other things but I really wanted to join the infantry. Like I wanted there's really, there's a lot of different communities within the Army. And one of them is the people who there's people who have jobs, and then there are people whose jobs it is to do violence. And they're actually fairly separate. Everybody's in the Army, but they're different qualities of people. And I really felt like I wanted to start in that place. You might call me an angry young man. I don't know. But there was a way in which that it seemed like,
a formidable
that's where the challenge was. You know what I mean? That's where the challenge was. Like I could go be a map maker guy or something, and like that's not the challenge, And I think, part of it coming out of the wrestling room, was just like
bring it.
Yeah, like how do I stick that guy? You know, like, and this isn't a question of how do I not, how do I get away with the least? This is a question of how do I leave the most on the mat? And that to me seemed like the place that's the place you do that, so that's kind of part of that story.
Yeah. Interesting. And so because it was you were military, ministry, got your ordination, and then back to military. So you were in and out of those. So, but at the same, so go ahead.
Yeah. I mean, that's just part of the nature of the reserve component is that you're, they don't need you till they need you. And then when they need you, nobody else will do. So, and then you go. So, it made for a pretty quixotic life in that regard, that, to get established somewhere and then realize, okay, we're, so I have a lot of heart for you Guard and Reserve soldiers, because I really believe, it's one thing to be in the active component and doing it. And then, you put on the same clothes and they send you somewhere else, but you're always putting on the same clothes. Guard and Reserve soldiers, they put on different clothes all the time. Like they put on a uniform and then they're putting on, their dad clothes or their community clothes or their work clothes, and they're all of the, you know, they're literally kind of absorbed in different lives, and you know, the gear shift it takes, both, you know, psychically and spiritually, and to kind of continue to do that is it's hard. Like, it's hard on people, and I think it's harder on people than just, oh, I'm in the Army, and that's, you know, and I was a Guard and Reserve soldier, so I get to say that. So you know, like, I'm like, yeah, you know, like, because I've talked to a lot of active duty people, and they're like, oh no, that's not true. Like, no, it is true. It really is. The disruption and the sacrifice that they make, and largely untold.
I had not considered that. You're talking about them stepping in and out of harm's way, I guess.
Right.
To some extent.
Absolutely.
To a large extent. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to belittle that, but they are in and out of it almost, and at their choosing, and yet at the calling.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
You know. Interesting. So let's just jump back to fishing for a little bit and diving.
Yep. So I graduated from USM, and my roommate at USM, who ended up, he had started diving, and I had gone down in Pennsylvania and taken a job down there. It was actually working with kids who were kind of on the margins. So, and I started doing that work, and it really didn't suit me. I'm glad I did it. It was a great experience, but it was, you know, kind of some foreshadowing, I think, in my life of some other stuff, but it was really not where I got talking to him, and he was like, hey, this whole industry's opening up. The people are diving for sea urchins. And I'm like, what? It's like, sea urchins. It's like, guys. So
those things on the bottom.
I basically had never dove. I drove back to Maine with my last $500, got my diving certification, and was on a dive boat later that week, and you know, trying to figure out how to stay warm. Upright and warm. And warm. Yeah, exactly. And
Maine waters ocean waters are not warm.
No. Yeah, that was. It'll make you old fast. Like, that's for sure. But there's and the urchin, the urchin trade was all diving in the winter. So it was. So
again, you didn't pick the easy way.
Yeah. So no, and it was. And there was a lot of, that whole process was really an exercise of just, you know, can I do a hard thing? It was, you know, because it was the beauty of it is that it was really free, which was just, it was not there's no office to go to. There's no, it's very much don't work, don't eat kind of thing. And, and it was really, and it was it was an incredibly good experience for me at that time in life to really say, like, okay, not only can I do a hard thing, but lots of people can do hard things, but just can we, just kind of, endeavor to persevere and have some fun in it, have some joy in it. You know what I mean? Like, and so it was really, and I actually had a lot of, leaving diving for me was really frustrating because I really wanted it to be great. And I really wanted, like, I could see the meaning of what I'm doing. Like, I'm feeding the world. Like, people have a meal. I went to work. Somebody's gonna, some little Japanese guy's gonna eat that and have a nice day. It's party food, in Japan. So there's a sense where, like, you're gonna provide a piece of meal for somebody's celebration, and so I could get my head around all this good stuff. And at the same time, I'm just like, it's just, it's just empty. It's like, it's like, and I really wanted it to be more, and it never was, but the ability to work through that, to spend, and then the last year I was doing it, I actually started buying. So I was working for another guy. And so, and was kind of his agent up and down the coast doing some buying. And that was good for me because it kind of exposed me to this, like, the world of fishmongering is an ugly world. There's a lot of there's a lot of shenanigans, and so there was that kind of layers, it was kind of fun.
Layers of shenanigans.
Yeah, it's exactly right. So it was a lot of fun.
I just had a quick thought, a little off topic, but so you're down diving,
Mm-hmm.
and how long would you be down diving for? Probably?
So we'd usually do between 4 and 6 tanks a day. So, you get about an hour out of a tank when, because we were working. So, and so you wanted to maximize bottom time, and, we were in good shape. Mm-hmm. So we do, we do a lot of skip breathing. So, and, where it's kind of this kind of thing you can do, like, where you breathe every time. Instead of doing that, you breathe every other time. So you kind of get a little longer out of a tank, and just, the little tricks of the trade that we would do just to stay on the bottom. So 4 to 5 was about the average day. 6 was a big day. Like, it either meant we were having a really good day and we were slaying them, or we were having a really bad day and we needed to put something on the board. So it was it was either one of those, but
yeah. So my thought is, you're down there. This is well before they had waterproof any kind of music, or you're not. I guess my point is, you're not listening to podcasts or music while you're down
you're
there.
listening to your own breathing.
So you're listening to your breathing.
Although my buddy did make an underwater with a Walkman, of all things. Like, he had an old Walkman, and he neoprened took the speakers, cut the holes out. Like, he could not. I mean, it's really interesting. He could not stand the silence that much that he had to figure it out, and it would blow up on him every so often. And then he'd repair it, But he'd cut up some old. It was really like it was. He kind of created one, but. To a good point. I mean, it that level of listening. You listen to your own breathing for 6 hours a day. Yeah,
a lot of time to think. I mean, we don't have that what I'll call luxury today, because
that is really interesting.
Constant distraction. So I'm just curious about what if you can remember what was going through your head down there.
Well, a lot of it is you're trying to be smart. So you're trying to think through, like, okay, where's my bag? Where's my next thing? Okay, what's going on over here? Trying to pay attention to. It's a kinetic thing, because you're trying to pay attention to, there's actually a lot of work in terms of, there was just body work in terms of, because you're mostly neutral buoyant, but you're a little heavy. So you're kind of a little bit resting on the bottom, but any kind of swell is moving you. So a lot of times there's this kind of dance, you'd move a little bit, and then you move a little bit, and then you'd have to, there was a whole, so it was
rhythm.
There's a whole rhythm to it. So I mean, I guess you could say it was actually a little like dancing a lot of days. So so you think about the state you're in when you're dancing or something, there's a little, there's this more, but yeah, then you can, but you can also spend a whole day thinking about the girl that didn't call you back. So there's also those days, like, why you didn't call me back? I thought we had such a good time. And you can
dwell on some things.
You can drill a hole in your own heart really fast, doing that too. So,
So did that time down under the sea have anything to do with you then deciding to go into the ministry?
Yeah.
Because it was about that time that you got involved.
It did. Yeah. No, that was all that. Yeah. My call was all working itself out in that same time. Well, there's a couple of stories with that. The one is, it was a particularly cold day, and it's okay. You can work on particularly cold days when it's kind of below zero or whatever, or around zero. But if it's windy and around, you really can't, because everything gets coated with ice really fast again. So there's a level of complexity, but it was pretty quiet that day. So we steamed out and started diving, and so I'm working along, and I drain the tank, so the regulator starts to breathe hard. So you're like, okay. And so then I'd gotten a little tangled in my line. So normally what you do is you just tie off the bag that you're working while you're coming up. So I'm kind of looking, and it just took me I was a little more shoal, and it took me a little longer than I thought. And then, so I drop the bag, and I look up, and there's nothing but ice above me, because the ice had kind of moved, because now the wind came up. And so there's kind of a big iceberg, so I literally look up just in time to hit my mask. My mask starts to flood, and now I'm like, and I don't have any air, because I'm like, I'd already kind of drained dry what I was like, so doing this. And then I finally poked my head up out of the water. And because the wind had come up and my mask was wet, it immediately flash freezes across so you can't see. So now you're, just kind of like Vaseline on the glasses kind of look. And, and I just seen my tender and I knew he was going to come over. And so
the tender is the
guy who's going to come get us. Yeah. And so I knew he saw me, but because the bag didn't have very much in it, I didn't really have, normally there's like a little buoy to hang on to. You kind of hold on to your toggle buoy or whatever. So there was nothing really talking to me. So I'm in the slop and I'm doing this. My head hurts. I'm like, there's got to be an easier way. There's got to be a better way to make a living. This is like, it was actually a kind of a series of days like that. And it goes to actually kind of how I think call works and how we kind of know if something's a call or not. And that is, I really, I believe there's kind of this what's called a push me, pull you, which is if you're just being propelled out of something because you don't like it, that's probably not a good reason. That doesn't necessarily mean you're being called to the thing. But at the same time, there's a gentle kind of push out of what you're doing, but there's also a tug into the direction you should go. And that when we find both of those present in our life, those are the times to really kind of like, it's kind of the Dr. Dolittle moments of the push me, pull you kind of animal. It's like, okay, when there's two ends working, there's a work propelling you somewhere to get you out of what you're doing and calling you into something that kind of makes your heart come alive. Those two, that's really, and that was kind of one of my first experiences with that, of like being propelled out of it, because later, I would say, if not that day or later on that week, I would sit down with my dive partner, Joe, who, Joe, not a spiritual guy. Like, I mean, soulful, but he just, we had a lot of fun in school. He almost got his biology degree, I think. I don't know, but he had a lot of fun in school, and and he was my big brother in the fraternity that I pledged. He's, just one of the most fun guys I've ever met in life. And, and I kind of asked him later that week, I said, I've been going to this church. I'm thinking about going to seminary and thinking about being a minister. I said, what do you think about that? And this was a big, this was not necessarily the way we talked, although we were close. And he said that words that were just not the way that he talked. They were not even his words. He simply, and he says, Andy, you minister to people. Your presence ministers to people, and you care for them. If you choose to go to school and do that professionally, that's great, but you're always going to do that no matter where you go. And I was like, son of a, like, oh, I hate you right now. Like, because it was pathetic. It was really this very much, and so it was these coming together of these two things that really started to say, okay, this, and the real, and I just couldn't shake the dissatisfaction of diving. Even though it was a great life, and I look at it now and I still it was a great life, physically difficult, but at the same time, it was hard. It was hard, and but there's virtue in hardness. There was hardness. Exactly. There's a challenge of and it was an honest hard, which is I think depending there are. There's difficult things we do, but they're not always honestly hard. Right. You know what I mean?
That's validated.
And so you can point to a pile of urchins at the end of a day and say, I did that. So this, I don't know how, so.
Had you thought about the ministry before that?
Not at all.
Not at all.
Not at all. No. I didn't grow up in church. My mom came up through the nuns in Augusta, and she had a particular experience there, which was hard, and so she was, well, they're not they're not going to get my boys. That's what that was her phrase that she would say. Yeah. And my dad just kind of thought it was all kind of a clown show. Because my grandfather was actually, and my grandfather and grandmother were actually deep into the Congregational Church. And North Woolwich Church was their their church, and they they were for whatever their life together was, they would, he would bellow him. He was known for like one of these guys that couldn't necessarily sing, but made a joyful noise to the Lord, like one of those people. like he was known, he'd love to sing out of the hymns. He'd love, but all of it, for my dad, none of that held any water. So he really, I do actually think he still kind of shook his head and tried to figure out where he went wrong. Like he was just not, like he could not understand how he ended up with a kid that this is where he went. So I had, no one was more shocked than me. No one was more shocked than me. And in fact, I mean, that's kind of in Joe's statement was that like Joe. So other people could see it in, that,
they could see that. Yeah. This was a big shift, you mean?
Or no, I mean, other people could see like what my friend Joe had said, about like, this is what, this is who you are and this is what you'll do if you choose to go. Yeah. My roommate, Joe. Yeah. So, other people could see it in me before I could see it.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
But, which I think is often true, for many of us, we can see, which I think is in many ways just the power of, having a generation ahead of us that will admire us, because they can see things in us we can't see and that need to point those out. Yes. So before they either go off the rails or they die on the vine or whatever.
So you had been through your military training, you'd been in the reserve, and you still are at that point in time, right?
Yep.
And you've gotten your ordination. And did you see the connection with those two things coming together at that time?
I actually was going to get out.
You were?
When I got ordained, I was going to get out. I felt like I'd gotten the t-shirts that I wanted to get. I'd done the things I wanted to do. I really wanted the life of the church to kind of be central. Like I wanted that to be important. I felt like this, I knew what it was to be a reservist, and it's hard, and I didn't know how all that would work even as a chaplain. And so I was really I had everything set to just kind of let myself go once I got ordained. But September 11th happened. And I started having, and there was quite the obvious that there's going to be a need. And the thing
military need or ministry need or both?
Yes, a ministry need. Yeah. Like that's what that's how I understood it. Yeah. It's like, I mean, obviously not only is the Army going to call on those who are in uniform, but I really felt like, there's going to be a lot of hurt and a lot of hurting souls, and there's going to be work here, like there's going to be, and I looked at it as, there's one of the greatest challenges of chaplains anywhere is to be able to enculturate enough in the culture that they're in to be effective. And so whether you're in the Army, which is a really distinct culture, or you're in a hospital, which is a little less distinct culture, but still distinct. They have their own language, they have their own things they do, they have their own times that they move, like all that sort of stuff. Or you're in any other, or you're in a university, any other setting, you have to enculturate enough to be able to be effective, or else you're just going to be kind of the funny looking kid down the end of the thing that nobody's going to talk to, so you've got to be a part of that world. And one of the great challenges of most chaplains when they come into the Army is that they have trouble enculturating into the Army. Like it's a challenge, because they're not indoctrinated the way regular soldiers are. They're not brought in the way the regular soldiers are. There's all these challenges to it. So they, and part of that, there's some goodness in that, so where they're not kind of church of Army, but there's also challenges in terms of just effectiveness, being able to be taken seriously, all that sort of stuff. And so I was really on that point where I was ready to hang up my boots, and I started thinking about, you can do this. You have the ability to do this. Like, you have, and that, God's given you this past 15 years of experience, to be able to live into that.
And you can like you just described, though, because I know who you are, you can just step in there with them immediately, somewhat immediately, and they're going to listen. And like Joe said, you're ministering people without even knowing it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that thought just started to work on me. And when the time came to be like, okay, it's like I finally decided like, nope, I'll swap over to the chaplaincy and make that. Which was funny because when I made the decision to do that, it actually became a whole nut roll and became difficult, administratively. And so I was like, well, maybe not. I was like, maybe not. But then I realized like, oh, okay, this is how this works.
What's the push pull?
It's exactly. Yeah. It's that. And it's also that like, really? Do you really did you really think that? Because what's on the other side of it is going to be significant. So you need to say with a full-throated yes. And so it was kind of working through that I think was part of the full-throated yes that I had to say, like to really accept what I was getting myself into. So, yeah.
So you're doing ministry work in the desert, right? Eventually.
So yeah, eventually. So yeah, so I mobilized in 2002. I'm 4 years with Surface Deployment Distribution Command. So there's a huge mission. I end up kind of being I was really the chaplain of the 1-star that was there for most of the time at the operations center, which was really way above what I should have been doing in terms of my pay grade and experience. But again, it was one of these things. They didn't have anybody, and so it was a neat experience that way to get to see that echelon of how the world works. And in 2006, I kind of realized it was time to go. So, and 2006, I left and came back and went back to institutional chaplain. Went to Penn Bay and started doing work there. And then October 2010, I would get orders for Iraq, and so I would spend most of 2011 in Iraq.
So your commanding officers, what role do they play in your chaplaincy?
So it's interesting, every unit is different. So some commanders just really don't have much use for you and just let you go and do your thing. Some are really close. My boss in Iraq we were really close. Like he actually was, he's a great supporter of the role of the chaplain. He was the oldest soldier in Iraq at the time. He was 60 something. Like he was an old man. He was an old man to be to be in that world. But we're the medical task force. Everybody's they're doctors and professionals, and so you just in order to get that level of. But he was a card carrying Lutheran, and I ended up being basically the pastor to what was called the traditional service. So essentially the liturgical Protestant service, because everybody else, all my peers there were just, tambourine banging Baptists, and they were great. Like they were good. They cared about soldiers, but they just, there was this need for a service for, liturgical Protestants. And so I'm like, well, I know how to do it. Like I can find the answers. I know how to do it. So like, okay, you got it. But what it turned out is that was actually my boss's service. So, so he would, he'd be in church with me every day, every Sunday. And so that was, and it was really that experience, is what actually brought me back to the Congregational Church and brought me back to church in general and the belief in church, the worshiping Sunday gathered group is to, I would say probably of my time in Iraq, maybe 6 or 7 months of it, I was kind of leading that service. That was one of, that was basically the side gig to everything else. So, all the other duties that I had in Iraq, but it was to me so powerful because you saw, I mean, there were probably 30 some odd people that would come on a Sunday. The most junior was an E3, 19-year-old E3. The most senior was a 2-star, was the division commander of the oh my gosh, I can't believe it. I think it's the 25th. It's one of the division commanders that I can see his face, and that's embarrassing. It's been 10 years. So he ends up, and yet that little group would come together on a Sunday, and they would kind of check in on each other's lives, and they would support each other, and they would encourage one another. And you have these people like who are literally living out this kind of, love one another as I've loved you kind of command to journey through something hard together, even though they're not in it. They're not, the only thing binding them together is the common cup. And to see the way that the Spirit became present with that little group over time, and the way that it was both an encouragement in a dark time. It was just all the good things. And truly, the presence of God was in it. And so I'm like, and it just really, it was a punch in the face for me, because I'd really kind of made the decision, I think, that I was going to be kind of an institutional chaplain guy at that point. Like there's a path for that, and you can get the, all the things, and you can do all that. And that's kind of what I was doing in the reserves. So, and the church was, churches are a pain in the neck, man. Like their work, they're hard. And so there's this way in which I was like, I'm just going to go find myself a good hospital somewhere, and, whatever, I kind of had this little kind of narrative I'd had worked out in the back of my head. And I kind of realized, having spent that time with that group, that no, it's actually in the worshiping body that all the good things happen, and nothing else that doesn't. Like it really is, like, not to say that when I go to a bedside at a hospital, there's not, I'm not bringing, the care and presence and all that sort of stuff and the Word of God, but all of that is generated on any given Sunday morning. All of that matters because there was a community behind it, because there was a body that is incarnated into this world that has in it a presence of holiness and Spirit that can then go out in the world and do things. And that I had been kind of telling myself a story for a while, and it was really, and I'd say it was a punch in the face, because it was one of those, I was giving myself a pass and I didn't know it sort of thing, because I mean,
we can do that
because,
right?
Well, it's really easy to do, because you're like, well, I'm going to the bedside of dying people. Like, how much of a pass is that? Like, like I was like, I could tell myself all kinds of great stories about it, but I really, what I recognized was that, that the kind of again, where the action is, even though I think in, 2023 in America, particularly in New England, we're 50, 49, 47, 48, and 46 for church attendance in America. Those are the New England states. Maine is 47th, Massachusetts is 49th. So, we're not exactly and that's it. And so, so this is hard soil to begin with. And then in the midst of all of that, there's this, for me, just the recognition, I kind of like, well, and as sidelined as the church might seem and all of that, it's still where the action is. Like it's still where the really good things happen. Like it's where the really life transforming things happen. It's where the really where impact and difference gets made. And it's not to take away from any other good deed doers, but for me and for my lane and my understanding, like it really is still I remember hearing there was this phrase I hated for years, and now I'm coming to kind of begrudgingly like, maybe it's true. But it's that, the local congregation, the local worshiping church is God's plan for salvation for the world, and there is no plan B. And it's like, man, that's a lot. Like, that's a lot it's a lot to put on somebody who walks through the door on any given Sunday morning. It's a lot to put on a leader in the middle of that. It's a lot to put on people who would, take an office in a church. It's, it's a lot. And
it's interesting that you say that, because since COVID, certainly a lot of that has been pushed away, that I can't go, or I'll watch it on TV or whatever. And I'm not in a place to judge. It's not my place, but it's interesting that you say that. And how has that transpired for you since COVID? Has it changed much in your congregation? What's the population like? How's that going?
Yeah, we're down. We continue to be down probably a strong third from what our numbers were prior to COVID. They're not coming back. Where there's new folks that are finding their way, but it's interesting. Mostly are young families, which I was shocked at. Like, the old folks are like, I'm gonna die. Like, I don't, they're like, they were much more bulletproof and much more like unplussed by it. Something's got to get me. It was kind of their attitude, but the young families really, they've made choices that were not church. Like, they've really, so there's a lot of challenge in that. It as a leadership kind of issue, like that whole time, and even now, is still the single greatest leadership challenge of what I've encountered, and I mean, I don't know how good a leader I actually am, but it's hard. Like, it was hard. We were off the platform for 11 weeks. Like, that was kind of, and finally we made the decision. We're like, nope, we're doing it no matter what. And so, we're blessed with a big sanctuary, and not as, so we could figure some things out to kind of spread out. And, I mean, just kind of play pretend. But I mean, we're all playing, and we all know we're playing pretend, but it's, and I'm comfortable with that. Sometimes you need to play pretend, like sometimes you need to do that. And so I was, because the goal wasn't being right. The goal was keeping the body together. Right. And so it's like, okay, what is it going to do? How are we going to, how do we create a space that people could best feel they could move into it? And so, and that's like, I do a live stream. I started, when it first kicked off, I started doing a live stream so I did a live stream every day for about 90 days.
Did you really?
Yeah. 80 something days.
Wow.
Yeah. So, because I was like, I have to have something for this community to be able to know that their church is present in their life over this period of time. So
people were hungry. Yeah,
and they were hungry. They were, and there were ways in which they needed, what, the way I talked about it was, what it was. So I would do 11 minutes at 11:11. So it became 11 at 11:11. So, and it's still going on. I do it 3 days a week now, but its whole function was to say, look, this, in a world where all the punctuation marks in your life have gone away, like you don't have pauses, you don't have periods. There isn't, for a little while there, everybody's life was one big run-on sentence. And I said, the goal of this is to be a punctuation mark in your day, that you can pause and you can listen to this, and it will happen at a particular time. It will happen live. It will be here. You'll hear me, you'll hear a voice, you'll do it with, and on the live stream, you'll see other people that you know and love, and that we have a place and a space together. And so, the ability to kind of, just the kind of vague attempt to show up, it was an attempt. I don't know, I mean, there could have been better ways probably, but it was the way we did it. So,
well, that's great. Now, so kind of along those lines, and it goes back to what you said about your roommate, Joe, and his comments to you. I mean, that's deep, to come from him.
Yeah.
Where was it really coming from? And the question that comes out of that is, so your style of encouragement to people is very unique, I think. It's very easy for people to take wisdom, advice from you because you're just there, you're present. If somebody's out there that wants to provide encouragement to others and they don't know their place, would you have advice for them? What might that be?
Yeah, it's just hear the story. It's just hear the story. So it is every sacred text in the world, but Bible, true of Bible, but true of all sacred texts. The one thing they all have in common is they're a story. They have a beginning, they have a middle, they have an end, they have an arc, they have characters, they have things that they're telling us. And I think to me, what that tells us is that the most sacred thing in the world is our stories. Like literally sacredness comes through story. And so if there's somebody struggling in your world, the ability to hear their story is the single most important thing they need from you. Mm-hmm. Like it is just, there's not an answer. It's always been true, but I think it's probably never been more true than in 2023 that there's always an answer for every problem and everything that everybody has, and nobody cares and they don't matter.
Mm.
Like,
say that again.
There's an answer for every problem that you have. There's an answer for everything that's going wrong in the world, and they don't care and nobody matters, and they don't matter because we don't care and they don't matter because we're not really seeking the answer. Mm. We're not. That's not the problems of the world are. I would say they're the problems of disconnection and the problems of what the ancients used to call akadia, which is it's called in the seven deadly sins world is called sloth. But it's not as we understand it. It's not lack of energy or lack of work. It is spiritual inattentiveness. So it's spiritual numbness. Like you started by telling us, that you were, I was really insightful about what it was to, spend 4 hours underwater a day, just listening to my own breath, and how rare that would be as an occurrence for any human being, these days, because we're so overstimulated. Well, that overstimulation, that is akadia, is that we have all the choices, but none of them matter. We have all the things available because they're not the things that really matter. They're not logos. They're not the really real of our lives. They're not the holding a child. They're not the breaking bread with people whom we love. They're not the things that are absolutely eternal. They're not bringing comfort to someone in distress. They're not the things that human beings have been doing since they crawled out of the trees and that are still doing now, and that are absolutely you can pick any time in history and we were still doing those things for us because they were eternal. And that all of those things have been lost. And so I can Google an answer for any problem you have, but no one cares because that's not what I'm seeking. What we're seeking is the really real. What we're seeking is that authenticity. What we're seeking is that eternal, the connection with the eternal that comes in that, and that only comes with other people. I really think it only comes through sharing story. And that's not just like me telling you my story and you telling me yours, but making story together. Like, hey, there's this one time we went to dinner, there's the whole process of life together in that. And you're right on point when you say whatever COVID attacked in whatever, in the, body or in the biological life of human beings, what it really attacked is our spiritual foundation of connection together. And that is the connection of our life together as human beings. And that's true. That's its true damage point. Like that's its true damage point.
And will there be a revival from that?
Well, always has been.
Always has been. Yeah.
I'm kind of an optimist in that way. I mean, I'm not an optimist. I don't like optimism. But I believe in hope, and I believe in hope is something, and hope isn't, if you take kind of the biblical definition, hope isn't a thing. Hope isn't something you have or you don't have. Hope is a thing that you do. So when the Apostle Paul talks about hope, he talks about it as a kedge anchor. So he talks about an anchor. You see people with hope and they have the anchor tattoo. Well, a little bit of that is misunderstood that it's actually a kedge anchor. So when a ship would get caught on a reef or a sandbar or something, they'd lower an anchor down and put it in a smaller boat, and they'd row it out, and then they'd push it out into the water, and then the people in the larger boat would pull on the anchor, so as a kedge to pull them off it's how you get off a sandbar or something like that. And when Paul talks about hope, and when a lot of the other disciples talk about hope, what they're talking about when they talk about it as an anchor, they're talking about it as a kedge anchor. So it's this thing that we put out there, and then we pull against it. And so hope is not. Again, so hope is not a thing that we have like, oh, I have hope in this. It's like, well, you'll be disappointed because it will leave just as fast. I mean, in Emily Dickinson's kind of language, hope is a thing with feathers. It's like, well, that's too bad because we're going to cook and eat that thing because it's not because if the fleeting notion of it is, it actually is a thing we do. It's actually a thing we say, no, I'm gonna put my feet on the floor. I'm going to slide into my fuzzy bunny slippers, and I'm going to go pull on hope. I'm going to actively do this thing. So so I'm in that regard. I'm hopeful because I really do think, because I continue to see and I think most people continue to see the damage that it does. That is being done to one another, the corrosiveness of it, and all that sort of stuff. And we think. And it's so bizarre. This is the most bizarre thing to me, is that we think we're powerless against it. And that's the thing. It's like, invite some people you love to dinner. Like, spend some time, nurturing another human being that you don't owe anything to. Go, help out in some random thing. Go create some joy, go learn how to play music and then go play it with somebody. Like, we think this is all like, oh my God, the orange man or the or the daffy man or the whatever. Like, none of these things are, we actually have all the power to be able to affect all these things at any given moment, and it's all present. Now, it might not be easy because there are things that are corroding us and there are things that are working against us in it, but it's all right there. I mean, that's part of my, it's part of it again, and it all really does come back to me, a part of why I believe in church, like why I've kind of, as much as I've wanted to, like, kind of, find the side door of like, no, I'm really doing the church thing, but not really doing it. Like, as much as I really truly feel myself planted in this, because it's about being in this community and about having this community together and about having this little group of pilgrims walking each other home and walking through this world together and getting together and, having casserole and, this invitation to do life together. It's not simply I think one of the great kind of tricks that have been done, on, just on worshiping congregational life of any parish or any church is that, it's this need to show up for an hour on Sunday. It's like, that's not it. That's the entry discipline. Like, that's the, if you're going to go to the gym, it's better that you, go to the gym, but that doesn't mean anything has happened. That's just having walked through the door. Right. Like, it's actually the engagement with the machines, the engagement with the exercise, the engagement with the people there, the engagement with the trainer, that will actually create transformation, and that's, right. And so, showing up once a week and it's not, like, if that's all you got, that's all you got. That's great. But that's not that's never been in 2,000 years of Christendom has ever been what congregational life was about on, in any tradition, anywhere. Like it doesn't matter. It's always been about that the broader connection of the body together. So
brilliant. So to hear more, your live streams.
Yep.
How do we get to your live streams? How do we follow you? How do we keep in touch with Andy Stinson?
Yeah. So the most of the stuff is consolidated on the church's Facebook page. So First Congregational Church of Fall River. The live streams are there. They're also on our website. fccfallriver.com, which is it's a much it's kind of better relief and stuff like that if you want to follow that. But really, we've kind of made the decision to bring everything to the Facebook page. So if you go there, we're checking in there all the time, and that's kind of the place that we meet digitally. And the 11/11s are at 11/11 Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. So we're on the off chance that there's an event or something, but I'm pretty consistent with them. They're pretty high on the priority list in terms of getting done. And they're nothing more than, usually maybe a piece of Bible or a story for the day, or something that kind of a spiritual tool that we'll come across to kind of share. They're always raw. They're low production value on purpose. I've made decisions not to make them more than they are, because the goal is authentic participation, not shiny production. That's kind of what we're going for there. So, yeah.
Andy, thanks for the time. I can't thank you enough.
Oh,
great message.
I love it.
Yeah, super. Thanks for the time.
Oh, I appreciate it.
Yeah.
Thank you.